The scene with a boy on a bike is often a transitional tool in cinema, a cut scene. This is a spoiler alert, by the way, for today's conversation, but I just needed to give it some more thought and emphasis. When the cinema is really cinema-ing, you start to notice even the care and emotions put into a cut scene. Within the apparently insignificant landscape, or expressions, or activity, inevitably lies a metaphor, a hint, a callback. So you, the director, needs to convey a greater struggle that took place in childhood, because so far maybe the entire childhood has been a struggle. But they want to embed some lightheartedness, so use the innocence of a child, the lightheartedness of riding a bike. Except this bike is a silly trick bike with no chain, which means he's always pedaling hard, going up and down hills on dusty, unpaved paths for 10 kilometers. It's like an adventure track, but the child endures the struggle with the same peaceful, determinate expression of a child taking a couple of back alleys, hopping a few medians to get to the Circle K 4 blocks away. It's dusty. There are sudden obstacles, close up on the feet, never breaking the hard push on the rusting pedals. Some personalization on the bike, some sun peeking out of the clouds, some noises that startle him. Even in childhood, maybe, we'll learn that the protagonist pushed on through every struggle with grace. Imagine the rusty tones and golden gradient in the top half of the screen giving way to a softer orangey glow as illumination aids the transition of focus from the bike rider to the next scene. Aysanabee is that peace, that grace. Strange adjectives for an alternative rock star. It's not the first stereotype he has crushed. Aysanabee is a Juno winning artist, nominated again in 2026, possessing multiple top 10 charting singles, a #1 on alternative rock in Canada, and embarking on a tour to support the release of a new stripped-down album called Timelines. Technically, he is very young into his career, but very mature in his balanced approach to his life, upbringing, successes, and opportunities. My name is Glenn Erickson. This is Almost Famous Enough. Thanks for spending your time with us. This is Aysanabee. I like finding out who somebody is, like how they got to where they are right now from where they came from. So thank you, Aysanabee, for joining us today. Been hearing your music and watching and following for a long time. My last interchange with you was 2023 because I'm in Edmonton, Alberta. So I both saw you at our Folk Fest that year, which was pretty memorable. I'll tell you, you played in 2023, you played your full set was that tiny little stage up on the half hill, if you recall.
Yeah.
And they never, I don't know if you knew this, they never put the loud bands up there, but you were playing full band. And it was drowning out some of the other things, and I thought it was really awesome. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I was like, this is a fantastic mistake by the organizer. But I don't know how you felt about that. I thought that there was a real energy that year that probably carried through to you coming back here. Is that a normal, I guess, I don't know how often you get into the folk fest world of festival invitations. Is that pretty common for you, or is that an uncommon invitation?
Yeah. I've actually played quite a number of folk fests in Canada and in different parts of the world too. I think especially too because I play in a lot of different formats. Like I play with a band or I'll play solo. So I think people see me in both formats. Obviously, like I think when I play solo, I definitely lean into that folk style a lot more, where I feel like I have the time and space to kind of tell stories. It's just me and the guitar, so you kind of have that opportunity. Yeah, no, I think the music I make can definitely lend itself to that as well. I know they have me generally in like the alternative category, but I've come to kind of like that. I've come to love that category because it is kind of this weird catch-all. So you're not as quite as like pigeonholed in a way.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to earmark that for later because actually that is a thing that I was making note of as well. So, but I want to grab the other way in 2023 I was introduced to you, which was even more memorable because I love going to the Junos sometimes when I can. I love the big Juno Cup that gets played. They had a hockey game in 2023 that you participated in, and they mic'd you up here in Edmonton, and it was so funny and so fun, and you were so like free with yourself about playing. And I think most memorably was you were just complaining about feeling out of shape while everybody and wondering why everybody was skating so fast. It was very entertaining.
Wait, was I mic'd when I was playing?
For a little bit, they mic'd you up, I think.
I must have totally forgot about that. I hope I didn't say anything.
No, there was nothing negative about it.
Oh man, that
None
is
whatsoever.
hilarious, man. Well, it would have been really real then, because sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it was extremely entertaining. It kind of made the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of fun to watch that kind of a game because you have, I think, Oilers alumni probably. I think maybe you guys were playing against, if I remember correctly, and I think the other interesting part was again, like smashing stereotypes. The female half of the Rec Laws was playing in the game and also doing very well, which was awesome to watch. But yeah, the most memorable part to me was your participation in the game, which was a lot of fun. Does that kind of a thing happen very much in your career? Or those fun little one-offs where you kind of get to do something you would never get to do just because, you're in this business?
That's amazing. I love that was the summation. It was fun.
It was.
Well, I played pond hockey growing up, right? So like, it's funny because like I still had to like brush up on a ton of stuff because we didn't play with very many rules when I played on the pond with like friends. Like it was, and sometimes it got a bit like, definitely a lot of illegal moves, I guess.
But yeah,
no,
not
what?
full gear, I presume either.
No, it was just like gloves, skates, and stick.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention that. I actually am doing a similar game in like tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah. So I've been like, I just got back. I was playing in Mexico, and I was like, there's obviously not a lot of places to practice skating there. So like, I got back and like this week I was like, man, every day I'm here, I'm going to get on the ice and just, get my at least ankles where they need to be a little bit better. And, I got back and like all the ice rinks are just like caution taped off because they're all melting.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So yeah, there's, I think it's through like Music Counts, and it's like, musicians versus hockey players again.
Yeah, these charity games, right? Kind of promotional. Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, that was a completely new experience for me. It's like I don't often get to play with NHL players. That isn't something I'm like, not that cool, but so once in a while it's like super sweet, and so I agreed to do it again, and like I guess part of me has been like 2023. I said I wish I was in better shape. I'm still saying that today.
Here we are. Here we are. So is there any fun extracurriculars? Because you're going to be at this year's Junos. I would, not just presume, I see you're on some of the performance schedules. So is there any of the extracurriculars they try to do that you've been invited to or roped into, however you look at it?
Yeah. No, it was pretty funny too, because I remember like, I guess they announced the nominations back in January, and like, every time I've been there, I've performed on the broadcast, and so it's been pretty busy. This time I was like, oh yeah, no, like I'm not on the broadcast, so I guess it would be pretty chill, and I'll just like hang out and say hello. But yeah, no, it seems the schedule filled up really quickly, and I'm doing something kind of every day, which will be fun. Like I'm really stoked to be on the Juno songwriter circle. That brings me back to the folk fest world of just being songwriters in the round.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm excited to be a part of that. I know like a lot of people look forward to that event, and yeah, I always love it too. You just get to sit with like, people who are doing really incredible things in the music space and kind of get to hear, like, I get to sit right beside them and hear the story, like right there, like about how they wrote the song and why they wrote the song, and maybe some random tidbit you didn't know, like something happened in the studio and then that made the song, like you get like this cool, just really cool information about the song. And
you already alluded to banter. You're good at banter. Those are some of the best bantery moments too, where you actually get this relaxed on a stool exchange with other peers. Yeah.
Yeah, most times I've been getting better at it. Like I think it is wild because, man, even like I used to have such bad stage fright, and it wasn't even that long ago. I think like pre-pandemic, I was just I'd be so nervous to talk about the songs that I would just be like, "This is the title of the song," and then would just move and play it, and then I guess trial by fire, right? Like a bit, so, like I just you play so many times and you just start getting used to certain things. Like I don't think that stage fright has kind of gone away. I'm not even sure if it's stage fright or just like this, caring about the space you're in, caring about what you're doing and wanting to do a good job and wanting to,
Yeah, there's an anxiety that goes with performance when you care about it, right?
well, I think about like even heights. Like I'm not the best heights person, but like I will go skydiving and I will go rock climbing just because, you get this feeling that you don't get from something you're just comfortable doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just kind of learn to deal with that fear, and that's like something I've just come to learn about just going into spaces that sometimes I might not feel are that comfortable to me. But yeah, no.
Well, that's the tidbit right there, man. Like you talk about picking up tidbits, right? For people, I think people listening, like so often people who come and watch you play, you are very comfortable on the stage. You appear very comfortable. If you're not feeling comfortable, you've done a really good job. Obviously, like in this career, it's something you have to work on to be that comfortable and present that way. And I think a lot of people, you just look up at your artist and you just make a bunch of assumptions about like everybody who's doing it is doing it because they're so comfortable with this, which is so not true.
No, yeah,
No.
yeah. I mean, some people are. This is a different space, right? Like it's, everyone's different. Everyone's journey is different. I'm nervous almost every time I go up there, and I've come to just love that. Actually, it's the times that I'm not nervous that it weirds me out. Like that's where I'm just like, what is wrong? What's happening? I don't know. I just kind of tend to use that energy in the performance. Kind of, I think makes the show better for me.
Yeah, I used to get the nervous shits all the time before when I played. In a matter of 7 years in, when I was playing, I would still get the nervous shits before I go on stage. But then I felt better because I was a big hockey fan, and I'd read about some of the famous goalies. I think maybe Gump Worsley, one of the guys who threw up before Glenn Hall. He threw up before every hockey game or something. And he was like a Hall of Famer, played 20 years. Anyhow, can you imagine throwing up every hockey game you play? But there's lots of places I could jump in to talk with you. Obviously, there's things to talk about what you're doing right now, which is a very sort of cool step or stage in what you're setting out to do. But before we get there, maybe if I can ask you questions about kind of how you got here and where you came from.
Of course.
Which is of a lot of interest to me. And I think right off the bat, one of the things I'm really interested in is how, got this bug. I mean, there's lots of ways that people became artists and when they got the interest. I'll frame it this way, is that I'm interested in how you kind of accessed that inspiration and idea, particularly because your story comes from Sandy Lake First Nation, which is like a fly-in community in Northern Ontario. Canada's got a great reputation for not having resourced those very well at all with basic needs, let alone, education and the way music gets introduced and all these kinds of things. So I'm curious whether that's where it started for you or whether it was a bit later in life where kind of music started to kind of grow for you.
Yeah, it actually came a bit later because like I was in Sandy Lake until I was about 5 years old. And then my grandfather came up there. My grandfather came up to come check in on me because I was living with my aunt at the time. And so he came up and he was just like, "Oh, where's Evan?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know." And so he like went around the res kind of looking for me. And I just, found me just kind of wandering around, walking down some dirt road. And yeah, he's like, "Well, you know what? Someone should look after this kid." So he just like grabbed me and took me back to the Paw, Manitoba. And then I went to Winnipeg with my mom, and then we went to like Kenora and then Dryden, and then went to Thunder Bay for like maybe about a year before moving out in the like north of Thunder Bay, kind of out in a rural community. There's a place called Kaministiquia. And so we moved out there, and yeah, like my mom had this idea of like she wanted to live off grid, and she wanted to have like a hobby farm and solar panels and stuff like this. So like wanted to do that, but all that stuff is really expensive. And so we ended up just having this plot of land that like we moved like this trailer on. And so yeah, like it like a lot of the stuff didn't materialize, so we just lived in this trailer in the boonies with no electricity and no running water. And yeah, so like we had like a generator we'd put on at night. Like I think like we couldn't even get like hydroelectricity because like all the poles were too far away. Like we would have had to like spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get like poles all the way up the road and then have to pay a hydro bill every month. So yeah, like I kind of grew up there and like would go to like went to elementary. There was like a elementary school probably like 40 kilometers away. And yeah, I think my nearest friend was probably like 10 kilometers away. And like for some reason I had like out in the country, I had a trick bike. I don't know why I had a trick bike.
Like a BMX trick bike, you mean, with like fancy grips and stuff, or
yeah, it was like just so like no gears, right? And so in the country where there's like all these hills and your nearest friend is 10 kilometers away, and I'm just like having to go on this trick bike, and so it was wild. Like so we would go and like play and stuff, but then we'd always cross like this old rickety bridge, and we'd eventually like start climbing it and like hopping off this bridge into the river. But I guess like his dad was like really concerned about us just playing on this bridge, and eventually like petitioned to have this bridge destroyed because now all these kids were suddenly leaping off this bridge.
Wasn't safe for the children.
So then, you know, this 10-kilometer bike ride suddenly turned into like this 18-kilometer bike ride to like get to my friend's house, and I was because I had to go all the way down around this river
on a trick bike.
And so yeah, I ended up just like, you know, hanging out at my house. And yeah, you know, I tell the story of the three things I had, like this dune buggy made out of a lawnmower, a bow and arrow. And then like eventually one broke, and then like one got taken away because I flattened a tire on my mom's van. And then it was like a guitar my brother had left behind because he moved into the city to go to school, and then just, you know, got an apartment. We all kind of moved out at a young age and moved into like these roommate situations. Yeah, so there's this acoustic guitar. So, you know, aside from just like running around in the forest and playing with my imagination, I would like just start playing this guitar and, you know, learn chords, and then I started writing songs. I can't even really recall what I had a crush on somebody at school and like, you know, wrote a song about it or tried to. So yeah, you know, I was just literally just that was the tool at my disposal. That was the outlet. That was the one thing I had to play with growing up.
Yeah.
In this off-grid trailer.
Yeah. That bike story sounds, honestly, actually, it sounds like something out of a Coen Brothers movie script. It's just so, it's a very vivid picture to me. I guess I get really curious about people's influences. We often just ask the question, like, who are your influences? But it's not to me who, it's almost like, how did they become your influences or why? Like, I recently talked to a guy and he's very old soul for a young guy, mixing very like older, you know, almost crooner-esque Roy Orbison with, you know, like alt country because of current things. But in his story, he grew up with his head on a pillow with an AM radio under it, almost falling asleep to this sound. So it's not so surprising that it's built in. Part of my question about like where you lived and whether you were incurring, you know, some of this like remoteness, even how you just described the distance between friends meant you ended up at home more often than the typical, you know, maybe playground or, you know, backyard kind of playing with friends thing. What were you hearing that made you want to write songs? Like, what were you trying to emulate or recreate? I think that's how a lot of us start. Like, what was the thing that was sort of in your life, and whether that was coming, you know, from a big brother having, you know, a CD collection or how did that come to you?
Yeah, it was definitely Big Brother. Like you said, like we had that generator. So it's like my brother took mostly all his music with him when he left, but then there was Bob Marley. It was like Bob Marley greatest hits. And so I would plug those into, like, when the generator turned on, I'd put on those records and just listen to reggae music. And so I actually started by making reggae music. And then like, you know, I'd go into the city to visit my brother, and then I'd start like taking more of his music, you know? And so, and he kind of listened to like just a wide spectrum of all kinds of different artists. He's like into a lot of different electronic music. So there was like a lot of, you know, like Aphex Twin and, you know, all these different like interesting kind of instrumental music. And then, you know, he liked hip hop as well. So I'd be listening to like, you know, MF Doom and the Wu-Tang Clan. And he was into like, you know, all kinds of different kind of singer-songwriters too. I remember like even like, you know, even from some Canadian people, I remember having like listening to like a Wax Mannequin CD. I remember
Yeah.
I remember Wax. Yeah,
was that like Kim Go for a Soda guy? Was that his band? I think that was his band.
Yeah, like he had
Why did I forget his name all of a sudden? But yeah, that's a crazy reference.
Yeah, and like Radiohead. So I remember like kind of like, you know, just getting into my brother's music. And so it was interesting. Yeah, I got into Radiohead for a while too. I always find that interesting too, because I think we both have a similar thing where we don't like enunciate as well as we, you know, sometimes we just shape words that sound a little more pleasant to the ear.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was kind of wonder about that. Sometimes I'll play a show and that is some feedback I'll get. It's like, man, I love this one song, but I wish I could hear more of what you're saying. And I was like, man, I wonder how many times Tom York has heard that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure at some point people figured out to stop asking him. I mean, I think that's, well, here's my take on that is I had a question for you, which is, I mean, there's a long list, you know, I read your bio or I read some previous writings online about you, and they're doing their due diligence all the time of comparing you to other artists or for the sound or something, because you're just trying to classify to make you easier access for people. But nobody has ever listed the very first thing I heard when I heard you sing, because I got introduced to you with Nomads like anybody else, probably on alt radio Sonic here in Edmonton, and who have played the shit out of you, by the way.
Yeah.
Like they're a great supporter. But I heard Tim Baker of Hey Rosetta immediately in that song. The whole song sounds like a Hey Rosetta. I don't know how familiar you are with Hey Rosetta and their catalog.
Yeah, I actually really dug Hey Rosetta. And so it's interesting too, because I have this memory of like, remember the Way Home Music Festival?
Yeah,
and
I know that one.
Like the Way Home Music Festival was here for like, I think like 3 or 4 years, and they just had these crazy artists. Like, I'm not sure if that's maybe why they like went under, but like they just have the most insane lineups. And I remember there was 3 bands I wanted to see that year, and it was like Alt J, Hey Rosetta, and Neil Young.
Yeah, what an eclectic mix right there.
And so they all played at the same time. And I was just like,
no.
I was like, what? And so like, I was like, man, you know what? I should probably go see Neil Young. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I feel like there'll be more time to see the other 2 bands. And so I went and I saw Neil Young, and like, I remember being like, because he didn't play any of like the hits. He was playing all his new record, and like it was still cool, and like he was like like shredding and like extended solos. I was like, what one of the hits would have been a nice thing. But then Hey Rosetta ended up like not being a band anymore. I was like,
shortly after.
Oh yes, but I did actually get to I did get to see Tim play. I remember, and I met him too actually. I think like right out of the pandemic, like my career was just starting, and I was invited to play the Supercrawl. It's like this festival in Hamilton, and it was like just fresh out of the pandemic, and like so it was very interesting too. Like it was a full day thing. I think like Death from Above was the headliner, and like I was called into like because like someone had gotten COVID and they needed like a fill-in, and so like I was available. We put my name forward, and I got in, and it was super wild. I remember like I was like the first of the day, or maybe the second, because it was wild. I remember, I was second, because the first band was like this interesting soundscapey kind of, I don't know, they had so many different effects. Like they must have been using like the microcosm pedal, because it was like kind of like very trippy and very psychedelic, and there's like a trumpet and all different, like a couple of people just making a bunch of different kind of crazy intense sounds. I remember feeling kind of post-apocalyptic, because like the pandemic just kind of was. and like, so it was like this massive stage in this field, and then just like kind of hundreds of empty seats and this wild sound wall. And then I played and like there wasn't even that many more people. But then eventually, Tim played and I got to meet him and finally got to see him play. And I talked to him very briefly, and I didn't I didn't know he was from Newfoundland. So yeah, he had like one of those really thick Newfie accents as well. So it was like, but yeah, Tim Baker, fan. So I can definitely see how that probably rubs off on me. We're a product of everything that we ingest. So,
well, you talked about like not shaping your words, but I mean, that's kind of the charm, isn't it? Like when I hear like it's classic on Your Nomads, but you have a lot of other songs, you do the same thing. And what made me feel resonance with a bunch of Hey Rosetta songs is it's not just the voice, it's how you shape words, it's how you phrase things, it's how you when I'm in this key, which means I'm going to hit the high part of my register at this part. And then that's the part where my mouth is so open. And you just instinctively learn how to sort of shape around that experience, right? As a singer, I mean, vocal coaches will then try to either teach you or unteach you a bunch of that stuff later. But that I think that's inherent. I mean, you talk about Tom York of Radiohead, but thank God, like no vocal coach kind of came near that guy, right? For the same reason. But I guess my observation of that is that like when you start singing, you sing in a way, and this is how I always felt about Tim Baker too, is I expect to feel something. Like we've heard so much music in our life. I intuitively know, my brain knows where to categorize you, that, you know what I mean? Like this has meaning, this has feeling behind it just because of the way you're using your voice. I don't expect your lyrics to be fluff and meaningless. I expect if I were to see you live that there would be some energy and some commitment every single time. So I think all those things get communicated behind that, which I think is pretty special. So it'd be funny to me if somebody wanted you to just enunciate a little bit better, not understanding is kind of part of the whole package, This is the whole thing. So in getting to the place where you start putting your music out there, you sort of alluded to you're making music, you're writing songs, you've made some moves in your life to advance that. You got invited to this festival to when you put out your first record. I'm really curious what was happening for you at that time, because you had the experience where your first record, started charting on Billboard. It went number one on Canada's alt rock chart on CBC, which was at that time still a pretty relevant chart in Canada for where music is being played and being understood and heard. So that kind of stuff quickly elevates you. Very few people, I should put it this way, get the experience of their first song off their first album kind of getting that kind of acclaim and interest and then attention, which is what it's geared to do for you. What was your experience with that? Was it the quick imposter syndrome of people are talking to me, like things are happening, but you're still doing the same things you were yesterday, but now you have a number one hit? What was going on for you?
I think it was like definitely a combination of things, but because that was something I wanted this whole time, right? Well, like not that specifically. I wasn't like, I need to have a number one song. That's my life dream. Like it was just a wild thing to happen. I think because I moved to Toronto like to pursue music, and then like ended up going to college here and ended up like working in journalism. And so like ended up like I was still playing and going to open mics and setting up shows at like Rivoli and the Cameron House, and kind of hoping someone would kind of like, I didn't quite know how to like get into the scene,
discovered.
Right? Yeah. So I just play shows and have fun, and so I think what was good through my mind, I remember when all this stuff started happening, it was just such a wild moment of when you are trying to figure out how to get somewhere for so long, and then like when the pandemic hit, I was just like, you know what, like I have a good job, so I'll just I'll just do music as a hobby. So I like stopped looking for it and was just like, I approached music in a different way. Like I was just like, like I'm not going to try and make a product. I'm just going to make like this stuff that's important to me, and that like art that I just want to make and tell stories that I want to tell. And it was weird. Like it was So I just went and approached that record that way. And then all these things just kind of happened in these weird coincidences. And then everything started to snowball. Right. And so
Yeah.
when all that started happening and like, I sent in a performance video and then that led me to meeting the women at Ishkade and then getting the record deal. And then like, because the concept of the record was already there. Like I just thought it would have taken like many, 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 many more years. Like I thought it was, but I think like when I signed the record deal, like I don't know, it just made me work a lot harder and spend a lot more time trying to finish telling the story I wanted to tell. So yeah, all the radio stuff, like that's still super wild. Like it is still something. Yeah, it's still like very surprising and very crazy to hop in a car or like go into a grocery store and be like, it's me. I think like the coolest. I think I've one of the moments where I was just like, man, I felt really cool leaving that situation was like, I think it was probably like 2.5 years ago. I was playing Rifflandia in Victoria, and
Yeah.
I went like a day early, and so the band was going to come the next day, and I get out of the airport really quite late, and a taxi driver picks me up, and yeah, I load my guitar in and my bag, and we're driving into the city, and he's just like, so you play music? And I was like, yeah. He's like, so like, yeah, I'm a musician too, and he started telling me about his project, and we're just talking shop and talking about like what kind of music we make and what instruments we play, the whole thing, and he's just like, well, that's cool, man. Like, would I have ever heard any of your music? And like it was literally, I was like, yeah, it's on your radio right now. And it was
No
just like,
way.
yeah, the coincidence of that was like, I was like, no way that this has happened. Like, I feel so cool right now. Like, thank you to the radio station who made that happen. Like, I was just like, oh, that's
Wow.
so wild. And it was crazy.
Wow.
Because we got to the hotel and I was checking in, and then my song was also like in the lobby on their radio. Like it was like that stuff is like always so cool. I mean, it's still such like an incredible way to reach audience. I still play so many shows and meet people after, and like I like to be like, oh, like where did you discover the music? Quite a few people will be like, yeah, I heard you on the radio and I Shazammed you and saw that you were playing. That's how they got introduced to me, and that's how like they started following me.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, for people who don't know, it's like a half-hour ride from the airport in Victoria to downtown. It's like a long ways, and you're forced to have a conversation sometimes with your taxi or Uber driver, and it's a long one. If you engage, you're in for the ride for sure.
Oh man, it's yes. In the app, it actually lets you check that now. Hey, it's like conversation, and you can say none.
Yeah,
if you
in
want.
your Uber app. Yeah,
I never click the none. I always feel like that. I don't know. I just like skip that part. I think I'd feel like really douchey if I was like no conversations. Like, but there are times.
Yeah. I know people that do though. And I think I've seen that you can like suggest like whether you want music playing, some people have put in, or you can choose your music or something like that. I've hopped in and they've asked me what I want to hear from music before, and I'm like, I don't know, man, this is part of the experience. Like, yeah, play your music. Tell me a story. Like, taxi drivers have some of the best, or Uber drivers have some of the best pieces of conversation. I wonder if that was the queue in Victoria playing you. Shout out to the queue, because I know people that run the queue. That also, by the way, is obviously amazing, right? That happened exactly the way you just described. So now I've got like 2 nuggets that I think I'm starting to be convinced you need to sell your story to like a director to write the script, because the riding around on the trick brake for 10, now 18 kilometers was a great piece of a story. And then that's a great piece of a story too. So I guess I'm going to jump ahead, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just not jump ahead quite yet, because I feel like there's a similar version of the question I want to ask you of all of a sudden 2 years later. Well, I guess I'm jumping ahead. 2 years later, you win 2 Juno Awards, right? And that's not a lot of time. I'm sure a lot happened in between. So part of my first question was, a big thing happens for different bands. I've seen it, either that radio success, like you get a #1 across Canada. All these assumptions happen. Maybe it's most often with your friends or the people you know on a daily basis of like, oh, does everybody across the country know who you are now? Or this perception thing becomes really muddy for us, right? Because you're got a number one hit, but you might still be kind of walking around doing the same things you do every day. I've had some people describe it to me as like a version of imposter syndrome. They're like, well, I'm not making any more money on my shows and I'm still having trouble selling tickets for the next 3-4 weeks. Or some people talk about how it immediately translates into a change for them. Similarly, that happens with something like awards, right? You hear a lot of the big sort of famous stars talk about, oh, awards are meaningless or they don't do anything. And I've had conversations with friends like Dan Mangan about this and some others, when he won his award and kind of where that sat. He was well into his career already when he got a Juno as the new artist, best new artist. I guess so similarly, my question for you is like 2 years later, you win this very prestigious thing. I'm wondering if other people would be interested to know, like, what does that actually create in a musician's life? Like what traction does that give you? Does it open new doors or opportunities? Does it do things for you that translate maybe into more financial security, whether it be contracts or things like that? When you're on that trajectory where what you're putting out there is successful, how does that actually translate, or does it, or is there a bit of a myth? I'm wondering what your experience has been with all of that.
I mean, it's like for different reasons, right? Like I can talk about how it affected me personally, and on the business side, I guess too. Like it definitely did open up some doors too, because like we won it, but then we were immediately trying to like we were setting our sights to trying to get in, play more shows in Europe and play more shows in Australia and go cut outside of Canada. So I think when we were going places and taking meetings and stuff like that, like being able to say that like we won the Juno and it was like this historic moment because like I had was the first Indigenous artist to win either of those two awards. Yeah, it definitely helped in some like people just like maybe paid a little more attention during the conversation. You know what I mean? But yeah, like certain things happen, I suppose, for sure. Like, I think if you when the Juno, like fees go up and stuff like that, you still really got to do the work. Like at that point, like we were already like, I think before that happened, because that was in 2023, I had started working with my agent, Steph, 2 years before that. And so she was like, when she agreed to work with me, she was like, okay, like nobody knows you, so we have to get you playing like everywhere and anywhere. And so we did like I think we did like over 180 shows that year, and then the next year like did like over like 150 or something. Like we were playing everywhere and like it was just out there. And I loved it. Like I used to love performing more in the studio, but I think setting that groundwork and like building that relationship with audience, because like at the end of the day, the awards can only do so much. It's kind of on the artist to make sure something comes of it. Fans and audience, like that is where the career is really going to land. So it's just kind of like, yeah. I mean, I watched some people. Part of my curiosity about your experiences, I've watched some people in the past have that happened, and then their agent is now trying, like literally almost it feels like the next day, trying to book 500 cap rooms instead of 200 cap rooms or 250 cap. You know what I mean? That jump that happens in kind of typical Canadian venues. And then all of a sudden they're struggling. So they went from feeling like really successful, plus then this big tip of the hat to them happens. And then they start feeling unsuccessful, right? Because, they're playing in a bigger pond, I guess is the way I'd look at it. And that affects people differently, right? Some people, they love the challenge, and other people, they're too soft to their validation needs or something in it, and it starts to show, right? But I just didn't know whether you kind of had immediate changes in your career approach at the time, or whether it was still business as usual. I mean, like, yeah, no, like it was like such a shock to win those awards, but I never looked at it as like, oh, I've won the award, now I've won the game, and now I just sit back and enjoy this sweet, sweet ride. Like, I think when I won it, I was just like, now the work really begins here. Like, like it's like now it's time to kick it into a different gear. Yeah, and as far as like the different rooms and stuff like that, like it's interesting because like there are some places we play and then like the tickets move so well. Then there's other places where it's like it is still kind of hit and miss, right? I remember, even on some of the tours, like, we were like there was parts of the tour where like the tickets almost sold out immediately, and then there was some where it just, I remember we were playing in Moncton, and at the time I remember being like, oh wow, like I've never been to Moncton. I was kind of like curious. I was like why wouldn't we play St. John? Like we just finished playing the Area 506 festival like 6 months prior. You get to go back and continue to cultivate those relationships that were made in that room. And so never went to Moncton. And I remember like the tickets were kind of like not really moving. And I remember like we were out in like Charlottetown before that. And I was out with like the drummer from this other band I was telling about. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure. I was like, I think I just maybe have to keep coming back and, earn the respect of these people. He's just like, no, yeah, sometimes it's like a hit and miss. He's like, he was saying, this band went through there and, they had like 40 tickets move. And then this band went through there and like they had maybe twice that. And so like, I think we had like more tickets than both those other acts who were actually much bigger acts than myself. So like that made me feel a little bit I was like, okay, I just like, but the room we were supposed to play was like this bigger room. And so I was like, oh man, like 100 people in this space, like isn't going to like feel that good. But then I guess there was a fire in the apartment above this space and it triggered the sprinklers. And so like the damaged the PA a little bit. So we weren't able to play that. And I think like, maybe I feel like other teams might have just been like, oh, sorry, due to unforeseen circumstances, like we can't come, and to save face for maybe not being able to perform for as many people as they would have liked to. But we kind of pivoted and we found like a different venue. We played like this little arcade venue, and like it ended up being one of my favorite shows of the tour. Like the tickets didn't like move as well as we'd hoped, and like some people would have maybe just canceled it to save face and would have been like, due to unforeseen circumstances, we can't make this work. But it's like, what? To me, it was like, there's like 100 people there who want to see me. And there's 100 people who, decided to take their hard-earned money and buy a ticket and wanted to spend an evening with me. So like we went and it was crazy, like there's this one moment where we went into like, we went into the audience, we go into the audience and play one song. I'm not sure if this one woman thought like the show was over because she just started talking to me, and then like we're supposed to be playing a song, and I'm full on having a conversation with this woman who was just like, "This is the first show I've ever been to. I can't believe I've never been to a show before. This is the best thing I've ever seen." And like she was having like this spiritual moment, and I was just like, my drummer was like, dude, we gotta play the show. And I was like, yeah, like we're having a moment here. I like looked at this woman's partner. I was like, how have you not taken her out to a show before? This is wild to me. And even at the merch table, I was meeting folks, and it's like there was this one guy, and he was this younger guy who was just like, what? He's like, man, what? I'm not gonna lie, like I didn't know who you were. I worked here, and he's like, I saw there was a show here, so I decided to come and check it out. He's like, man, like, that was one of the best shows I think I've ever seen. And because like we had like a lighting rig, we had our own sound person, like we had all this stuff to put on this production on this on this big stage, and we ended up putting on here. Anyways, like he was there with like all the records. Like he was buying all the records, and he's like, next time you come through, I'm gonna bring all my friends to see this show. And it's like, that's where it starts. Like you're gonna have really amazing shows where like 1,600 people show up, and and everything just goes without a hitch. And then you're just gonna have like these other interesting moments that are like maybe not as glitzy and glamorous, but like they are still very special moments. Yeah. Some places you just got to go, and you got to keep going back and develop. And, that one person is now going to bring 5 of his friends next time I come, like.
I'm wondering if I can go backwards a bit, because I'm really interested in the things I read just about the inspiration of your first record, the name of it being your grandfather's name, which I'm hoping it just is pronounced as it looks. Is it just pronounced like Watin or?
Oh, it's Watin.
Watin. Okay. Emphasis. Yeah. But I heard you talk about him a little bit earlier when you said he came and he found you just wandering around, and he's like, someone's got to take care of this boy. Obviously, has had such a massive influence in your life that you were able to pay so much tribute or homage in multiple ways, not just one way, like naming the record, but the art and including his voice in things. Here's the reason I want to ask you about what your relationship was like with him, because I think what never gets talked about is how difficult men's relationships are together. Fathers and sons, or grandfathers and grandchildren, or just men and boys, or just men to each other, that we still find a way to impart, life lessons, but, care and support in different ways. Doesn't get talked about enough, I think, in the way that it happens so well, that you feel like that we care so deeply about each other, even though it doesn't look always the same way. So I'm just curious about what was it about your relationship with your grandfather that really imprinted himself on you? Like what was it that he did for you that, are kind of the things that you just still are maybe so present in your life still? If that's an okay question to ask.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for a lot of reasons, my grandfather was definitely the rock of the family. I'd say there was a lot of crazy dysfunction in my family. There's a lot of everything, from mental health to addiction to a lot of things that impact a lot of families in this country, but especially a lot of different Indigenous families, and so my grandfather being this place of stability, which is really wild to me too. Just obviously didn't think of it that much when I was growing up, right? And then I was playing shows at bars underage, and he would come and pick me up at 1 a.m. and drop me off at my apartment. You know what I mean? He was always very supportive, very stoic, very quiet, and so he was such a steadfast pillar in not just my life, but in the lives of all the family around him. And so it was it was a beautiful thing to be able to kind of make this record and kind of honor that. And but the thing is, I learned so much in the making of this record. Even though he was a pillar and we're together, and we didn't really talk about a lot of real stuff, not that it wasn't real, but we didn't talk about a lot of the stuff that ended up in the album and a lot of the stuff that didn't end up in the album, all that year's worth of conversation we had in 2020. I'd say we in that year, I learned way more out in all the years prior. That's the year I got to know him most, and all the things that he had been through and all the stuff that he carried this whole time, and all this stuff that, I don't think a lot of people in our family knew. It's just my grandmother, my grandfather's cousins who used to, and people who had similar experiences. Yeah, it was such a...
Did it feel like a gift that you didn't know what to do with? I'm wondering, because it just, the way you tell that, I had a pretty stoic grandfather who didn't say very much, very respectful, very kind man. It wasn't until I was a young adult and I went back with some friends, or I think maybe I took my girlfriend back to visit them, and he started pulling out, maybe it was just to impress her because she was fun and cool, but he started pulling out all his war memorabilia and started telling stories. And he never told any of us those stories as a kid. And now he was giving them to me. I just remember thinking, I just got given a gift that I know for a fact other people don't have, kind of like what you were saying. And I didn't know what to do with it. I was just wondering how you sort of took all of that gift. Was that things that do you feel like you need to move those into your music somehow, or do you feel sometimes you need to just keep those to yourself?
I think with the album that was made, I feel a good, his story was saved, at least part of it, and can live in this certain space, right? Obviously I still have all these recordings, and that's just it's just great to have them just for future generations of my family, just to be oh yeah, this is where we came from, and it's this archive of family history, right? Which is, it's just not having to worry about history being lost as much, even though some of the history is quite dark and quite heavy, there's still quite a few beautiful moments, and yeah, I'm not sure if I'll make any more albums with that, but I think the album that was created, I think the wildest gift was like my grandfather through the record had come to this place where he was able to move on with his life. And this got to happen before he passed away. You know, like a lot of people who end up going through the things that like he did with residential school and with, you know, all the terrible experiences there, like, and making the record and like, you know, him giving me the blessing to put it out. And then suddenly that opening up conversations with him and his people, like all his friends and nurses. And I think when people finally got to see him and like see all of him and, you know, him being able to talk about it, him being able to be heard, him being able to be seen. If he got to this place in his life where he was able to like let go of certain things that happened to him, he was able to find peace before he moved on. And like, you know, for the majority of residential school survivors, like I don't think they'll ever get that. Like it might be something that they carry with them to the grave, you know, like, so it's like, that was like the wildest thing to come out of that record beyond like, you know, I like I mentioned that too, like this whole last tour, that's like a story I like felt the urgency to tell, just because like I do get introduced as like with the Junos and with the accolades and stuff like that, but beyond that, like there's that really wild thing that came from that record that was like unexpected, and it just, you know, shows the power of not just the power of music, but the power of things that can come of just having dialogue and having conversation with each other.
I mean, similarly in there, I think I want to ask you about, I'm assuming that a lot of places you go, not all of them, you probably also get introduced as an Indigenous artist. So my experience, I grew up in this like very Christian background. The only music I was going to play was Christian, even if it was Christian rock. And I learned very quickly, anybody who did that immediately carried the weight of this label that had less to do with the music and more about how they talked or how they dressed or how they presented themselves or who they hung around with. There was the weight of a lot of other expectations beyond the music, which seemed unfair considering it wasn't even really a genre. You know what I mean? It's not rock or blues or jazz or hip hop. It's something else. I've seen this happen with my friends in the queer community where they sort of get assigned the expectations as well to be a queer artist. And I know you get introduced that way all around, and you don't shy away from your history or your legacy or your stories. And I think it's really beautiful, but you know, there's an expectation to it there. And I guess I have a curiosity about how you handle that. If you still, you know, with your growing success and wider audiences or attention, yet whether that gets pushed on you even more or not. So I'm just curious what your experience with that label has been. I'm assuming it doesn't always feel fair, and I don't know whether it's something you care about it or not. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I think there's so many different ways that comes into play, right? You know, I think there's sometimes where it's like, there's this Indigenous artist coming to town, and you'll see a comment being like, "Is it gonna be political?" It's just kind of like, what does that mean? But also, yeah, maybe. I think sometimes there's this expectation, and so, you know, I enjoy the idea of challenging that too. Like it is, you know, when maybe people haven't heard me before, and you know, their partner brings them out to the show, and you know, it's like, oh wow, like this guy plays like rock music, or this guy's doing this really soulful song, or like, you know, I've never seen anyone play the guitar like that before, like, and then it's just like doing like kind of breaking those stereotypes and breaking those you know, those boundaries sometimes people might put into their minds. So like that's always an exciting thing for me, to just kind of go into a space and be like, oh wow, like this is like, this person's doing some real crazy things I wasn't expecting. But I mean, yeah, I suppose there's like maybe little isms that I'm even guilty of myself. You know, I like to have a beer once in a while, but like, you know, I still feel a way about having a beer on stage because I'm an Indigenous person, right? And there's the stereotype, and there's like, you know, there's this example setting. You know, there's a lot of First Nations in this country where they're dry reserves, right? Like you can't bring any alcohol into these communities. You know, part of that's still in the back of my mind because I know there is a lot of traumas and mental illness and people who turn to substance to kind of deal with that. And so like I kind of like sometimes I'll feel bad about like having a beer on stage, but like because it's like, you know, for me, I know like it's not quite, you know, it doesn't affect me in the same way as it might affect other people. And like, I do kind of feel a certain way about like, I don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, having a strong social consciousness, most people's day-to-day jobs aren't going to be affected the way you are. They aren't being forced to make that kind of a decision based on their social consciousness the way you are, because you're on a stage in front of a bunch of people and you're deciding whether you're responsible for their perception coming out of that or not, right? And juggling what was very authentic, I think you shared, which was being aware of like historical trauma and being sensitive about it versus just a bunch of just shitty racist rhetoric that still gets thrown around. I don't know. Like, I think maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong on this one. I don't think I am, but I grew up in Middle Prairies, Saskatchewan. I thought that there wasn't a racist problem. I didn't realize later because I just didn't see it. Just because there was like hardly any Indigenous people around. All I saw was racism on American television. There was no Black people in central Saskatchewan, small town. So I just was shielded from reality. So I couldn't actually make a good assumption about reality. And then you fast forward to now, and I think a lot of people think because it's talked about so much more openly in the public, they start to think like things are getting fixed or better. But I follow some Indigenous creators on socials. They share things that they deal with every single day that get said to them online and in these places that would just make anybody's, hair stand up on their arm. So I'm just wondering, like, if you're having to sort of, even in that kind of a simple personal moment of like, I'm really aware of all these things. What's my choice going to be? I'm wondering if are you feeling like not much is changing? Is not much changing in your, in your lifetime, or especially the lifetime that you've been able to sort of be on a more public stage and sort of see how things happen?
I mean, there's always still so much work to do, right? But I think in the context of like going through my grandfather's story, and even the context of like my mother and her experience versus like my experience, obviously I think generationally, and because like I spent so much time interviewing my grandfather and, and just experience things as they happened with my mother, you know what I mean? Like things are changing, like maybe slowly, but, in a direction that's, I think it's getting better. There's still plenty of work to do. I think too, like, yeah, I grew up in a lot of smaller northern communities and, especially growing up in Thunder Bay, because it was like Thunder Bay, there's just like a lot of tension there because, Thunder Bay was the hub for so many fly-in Indigenous communities, right? Communities where like there would be like, 200 people living there and everybody knows each other, to suddenly, all these communities having to send their kids to Thunder Bay to go to high school. And yeah, so it's like, it led to just a lot of misunderstandings, like definitely it led to racism in some cases and violence. And like there's different kinds of podcasts and stuff on that topic up there. But so yeah, like I think I got to experience it from a pretty intense standpoint, and like, so yeah, it was interesting. I think I had so many different experiences in experiencing direct racism, experiencing my heritage as like a dangerous thing, to like, yeah, like, reclaiming my name and being proud of who I am. Like, so like the arc has been crazy even within my own lifetime, right? Like I remember when I came here and I went to go to college, and one of my classmates was like, "So what are you?" And I was like, "Oh, here we go." And I was like, "Yeah, so I'm OG Cree." And they were just like, "Yeah, man, that's so cool. Like, I have so many different questions." And like, it was just like such a wild 180, right? So it's like,
yeah,
like obviously like there's so much happening everywhere, and like I'm not privy to everyone's experiences. But yeah, like I think, within the realm I'm in, like there's little beautiful moments that I see happening, right? I think when I won that Juno in 2024, like it was like the most Indigenous artist to ever be nominated. So like I had asked everyone to stand up during like when I was up on stage, and it was like this crazy thing to kind of see all these different people stand up. So yeah, more Indigenous artists are getting access and seats at the table. I mean, could it be better? It could always be better. Like that was a wild thing to see. And yeah, even the tour I did last, like it was just like, Yeah, I had asked like local Indigenous artists to kind of come and share the stage with me at every show I did for like the last
Mm.
two tours. And so like I got to meet like different artists from all across the country. Yeah, like
Mm.
some people I were just struggling trying to figure out how to make the music thing work. Some people, yeah, like are still experiencing pretty intense like racism and stuff like that. But I don't know. It was still pretty special to kind of build that community and I think, like I'm not quite even sure how to approach it. Like I just play music and I tell my story and it's wild to see it, even that have like a specific impact. I'll go take my folk music style approach when I'm playing solo, especially, and I'll
Hmm.
play songs from every different era of my life and I'll talk about, all the different places I've been. I used to work in mining, so I talk about working up in the wilderness. I talk about falling through the ice and almost dying, and I talk about like, wow, my life almost ended working for this mining company, and that really sucks. But I didn't, and so like it was that near death experience was the catalyst for me, like moving to Toronto to go pursue music, And so it's like, I think when people start to get to know you and start to get to humanize you and start to see similar experiences within their own lives, they can like that mystery gets shed and they can kind of see more. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a human being just like me.
Well, that's a great point. I think because, I mean, I led with it about being labeled as Indigenous artists. And I think it's just that, is that we use labels at the front end when we don't understand anything else, right? And we lose the labels when you gain understanding and you start to gain some interest or empathy or any of those things and get the opportunity to do that. Because like you said, you're like, I just play songs and then you have these stories to tell about your life. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just hopefully we're moving more and more to where, widespread, we just adopt that without relying so heavily on that label at the front end of introduction with people and just allow them to be what they are and you to be, I don't know whether you like it. You seem to not mind it. An alternative rock artist in Canada. Canada seems to have definitely labeled you that way. So let's pivot a bit here to my last question for you. And it's just talking about what's next for you, because you're on April 10th, you're releasing a new record, Timelines, and it's songs that you've already produced. Is this the old standard, this is my unplugged album, or is there a little more, what's your sort of take and nuance on the stripped down version of past songs?
Yeah, just cheating a little bit and re-release an old song. Try to hit gold twice. There's two things. Like one, that's how so many people were introduced to my music. Like early on in my career, like I played so many solo shows and it was simply because I just couldn't afford to bring a band on the road all the time. So like I would like,
exactly.
it was wild. It'd be like, playing a band show and then, it costing a bunch of money and then having to play like two solo shows to make it all back and then to pay for another bit. So it's like there was so many times where I played so many solo gigs and like that's just how people got introduced to me. And then like I never had any acoustic stuff recorded, anything for like fans to like take home and kind of relive that experience. It was just like this live thing that happened whenever. And so it is really cool to kind of be able to offer people who want that, like for them to have that, to be able to kind of relive that experience. But on the other side too, like it was really kind of good for me to even relive that experience. Like so much has happened in the last like 4.5 years that it's like, I was always talking about like, I'm just gonna sit down and reflect on this crazy thing that happened. Cause like my trajectory, I wouldn't be isn't that normal. And I think through just like all these experiences I've had kind of made it a bit easier to kind of go through this whole process. Yeah. Making a record, like an acoustic record, and having to revisit these songs and revisit who I was during that time, like kind of did force me to take that time to reflect and kind of,
Yeah,
look
that
back at
is the experience. That is the experience of the songwriter and performer, right? That quote, I'm air quoting, regular people don't have, which is you write those out of a version of yourself that might be 10 years old. Like, unless you're somebody who's going and digging up your photos from 10 years ago and recalling who you were when you were graduating college or whatever that thing was, like, that's not a regular daily activity. But going out and performing your songs night after night, you're sort of forced into this version where you kind of, are sort of faced with who you were and sort of having to sort of retell those stories. But I mean, I will say it sounds a little though, like, because you're going out on a pretty long tour right after the Junos with this release in April. So this is your chance to recoup for the last 2.5 years by having a stripped down tour.
Yeah, I gotta put some money back in the bank. Yeah, no, it is wild. Like, touring is a wild thing. Yeah, I think it's interesting, like, putting on your own tours, and like, I just really wanted it to be special too, right? So it's like I put some production in it and brought like a really awesome crew. Yeah, like, I think it's wild when you're doing your own headline tours. You're just kind of hoping to break even is like the goal. But normally, I think a lot of people end up paying out of pocket for their own tours. Like, it's a pretty crazy, weird, chaotic, beautiful thing that we get to do. Like, you really have to love it. If you don't love making music, if you don't love sharing and creating a space for you and your fans, then you just shouldn't do it. Because I mean, like, I haven't like gone and I've been a little nervous to look at the numbers, but I'm assuming like the first tour cost me $40,000. I'm assuming that last tour cost me closer to $100,000. Like, it is just like I'm lucky. We're lucky in Canada that we get grants to kind of help solve, like, bridge that gap. But that those numbers, I think, are even after the grants come into play. So it's like, but I kind of position myself in the way to do that. Like, I'm not like a I don't go out and splurge, and I don't drive like a Bentley or anything like that. Like, so the fact that I had the ability to go and go and like create art and then be able to bring it to people and give them a show that I'm really proud of. Like, it's I don't really look at it as much of a loss as much as it is an investment. Like, to create this experience for people, for you and your fans, and so that, and to keep wanting to do better every show and make it bigger. And the biggest thing is like, like, that was my first 2 big headline tours, and it was like being able to create that space and also make sure I'm paying my people good too. Like, that's another thing. It's like, session musicians in this country have it pretty tough. Like, the gigs are so sporadic and stuff, so I'm always pretty big on making sure I'm paying people like a living wage. But yeah,
so where are you on the I still love it so much scale? Because you've had a look at everything so far in the business. People start to get a little jaded in this business. They start to air quote get too old for this shit. So where do you find yourself right now, kind of looking out at, like, I'm getting into another quote unquote cycle on the I still love it scale?
Yeah, like, we got that release coming out in April, and we'll be like going out and supporting that. But a lot of this year, like there's quite a bit of space here and there, which I'm actually kind of pretty happy about, especially some space in the summer, which is I'm actually looking forward to, because I'm always writing in the winter. So I am kind of curious of how writing in the summer will impact the way I approach it. But like, I already have like a bunch of concepts in mind for working on a new record. And like, I'm actually in the process of writing a bunch of outlines and reaching out to people and collaborators and stuff. Yeah, this is I always feel like my best music is yet to come. Like, I always think I'm always trying to at least like one up myself and grow and evolve and kind of make sure I'm challenging myself. But yeah, I think bringing it back to the basics and kind of going back to, all these experiences I had and combining journalism, combining music, telling stories that like I feel like need to be told. It's a writing year for me, and I'm excited to I'm not sure.
That's cool.
I'm not sure how much I'm going to dig into that. I don't want to leak myself before it even happens. Yeah, like, if I'm being completely honest, like, it was interesting putting out this last record, because like the last record was just this collection of songs from moments in my life over the last 2.5 years. So it was really tough for me to go out and like market this record, I guess, because it was like there was so much happening in the world that it felt really weird for me as a person who cares about the world and cares about, am I taking up space of being like, hey, check out this song about my feelings? Like, it was like, And I know like people are
Yeah.
like, but we need music too. And so it was like this weird position I found myself in with like, it's just the state of things now. Like it's gone are the days of just putting out a record and then you just go out and tour it. Like you kind of have to like, we live in this digital age where we do have to be like talking on our phones all the time and be like, hey, what up? Check out my stuff. And so it's like, I don't know. I think all these different elements, like how I felt marketing this last record, and I think it's really informing the way I'm approaching this new project.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that sounded, I know you've toured with Dan, but that sounded like literally word for word the way Dan talks about his existential dread of having to market himself and be a content creator now to have a career in music and promote his music that he wants to connect with people around, but do all this other shit just to try and get there. But
I think I don't mind it as much if it's just like, for me, it's just like, is it relevant to a lot of things that I care about? You know what I mean? So it's like, because it's important now to approach projects from, it's, I've approached a project before just in the context. And then, I approached another project where it's like, oh, how will I create this live experience for the fans when we're all in the same room together? But now it's like, you really do have to like approach a project and being like, like, what's the context?
Yeah.
How is this going to come off live? But also like, what is this world that you're building? What is this world that you're inviting people into? And how does it all tie together? And how do you tell this story? And like, it isn't just sonically now. It is like all the elements that you tell. So it's like, I'm trying to look at, I'm approaching it from a different way that doesn't feel so icky, I guess.
Well, I mean, you sort of alluded there. I will just say one of the things I've appreciated about just observing your work and your career is an attention to aesthetics. Even sort of, if I can pull that out of what you were just saying too, is that you show that you care about your aesthetics are so thematically strong all the way through your records and your career of what you're doing. And I also, I love that you just said you approach them like projects. I think that's getting lost a little bit in today's day and age when people just I can write a song, I can put out the song. We're starting to lose the plot, it feels a little bit, about how people are telling stories and kind of creating milestones along their career. So I really love that you're approaching it like a project. I think that's really refreshing. I appreciate the time you've given me. I've taken up a lot of your time. So I just want to say thanks for the time you've taken to sort of tell your story and your background and where kind of the music came from. Because I think your trajectory is clearly not taking a dip. I don't hear an ounce of jadedness in your voice in telling your stories, which is really awesome and refreshing as well. You have another 2 Juno nominations coming up at the end of the month here, which is awesome. So we're pulling for you to win those, whatever the winning means, of course, for us. But I think the recognition is fantastic for the work that you've done. And I'd be really interested to hear what's coming next. So I encourage everybody listening, in Canada, you're going to be out on the road doing this, promoting this new collection of old songs in a new expression. But I think especially just to be able to connect back with you the way that you felt you connected with people is a special approach to take that I think people will really love. So I'd encourage everybody to do that and to take a look into it. But I just want to say thanks again for taking the time and being willing to answer some questions and sort of share your story, which I think is really great. And we'll see if we can get it into the hands of the Coen brothers or somebody similar. Some great cinematic moments in there for sure. But
thank you.
Just best of luck to you at the Junos and on the tour, man.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this year. It's like it's a good balance. It's a good balance of, I don't know. I guess they call it off cycle. Is that what they call it?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with a number of people because the concept of the cycle used to be so locked in, especially in Canada, and the way the touring circuit was so well defined. It was like an album wasn't a clear 18-month cycle, but the internet's changed that so much for us, I guess, right? So,
well, yeah, it's like the land of singles you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, it's a weird landscape. There's no right or wrong way to make music or approach music. I think it's just the end of the day. It's just like, you and your audience, your fans are the only thing that keeps you going in this industry. So it's like, I think the way I've come to, it just makes something that you believe in and that you feel super authentic and that you're super proud of. It's like, man, if you're not super proud of what you're doing, why should anybody else be? So, yeah.
Very true. Good point for everybody. Okay. Appreciate you very much. Wish you all the best. And hope I bump into you and get to see you. Maybe you'll rock the hill in Edmonton again sometime soon. And we'll run into you around here too. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Hey, I'm Alexi. Stick around for Post Fame with me and my dad.
Hi, Alexi. Welcome to episode 37.
You welcome to Post Fame.
Oh,
this
am
is
I?
Post Fame with Alexi. So welcome to Post Fame with Alexi.
Okay, well, you need to get... it's not just with Alexi.
Yep.
Do I need to change the graphics?
No, I don't have that much to say.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for having me here.
Yeah,
for
you're really welcome.
episode 37
Of course.
and Post Fame.
Who was our guest? Did you do your homework?
Yeah, Aysanabee.
Yeah, good job.
Are you saying that because I said it wrong for like the first 6 months that I ever...
No,
Oh.
maybe.
I don't know why. Like sometimes...
What did you say? I can't even remember now.
I can't remember now either. I'm so glad that I corrected it right out of my brain. But when I see like a 3-syllable name, this sounds so terrible and so like white. But when I see a 3-syllable name, I so frequently like make the wrong choice. Do you know what I mean? Like I remember to the point where I remember we were hiring somebody at work and she had a 4-syllable name. And it's sort of like, the emphasis of the syllables for people, you can look at it like a pointy graph, like it's up, down, up, down. And you want to know where to hit it. And I always seem to go the wrong way. I remember working so hard with her because I like had to visualize in my mind. It's like up, down, up. And like, do you know what I mean? Like and so I had said Aysanab's name wrong for a very long time until I had to like, put my mind to it.
That's really funny.
And then I put my mind to it and then it's like, I can't even remember how I did it wrong. So that's a good thing.
And I can't either, so.
Yeah.
Yippee.
Yeah. Yippee. But yeah. So very, okay. So my favorite, I'm going right to this thing right off the bat. So the thing that I thought about afterwards talking with Aysanabee was, I got so stuck when he was just telling his story about that he didn't have a lot of friends around because they were like 10 kilometers away because of this place that they had sort of pulled up on some land that they could only run a generator at night when they needed to. And, for him to see people, he had a bike that was a stunt bike. So it didn't have a chain where, in other words, there's no tension in the pedal. So you can't generate more speed and more power just by pedaling harder. Right. So it was essentially just like the same, like it's such a movie thought to me. And I mentioned it, I know in the conversation with him, but it was such a movie thought to me about this kid who's like literally pedaling up a big hill over all this terrain and just is sort of committed despite all of the drawbacks. Do you know what I mean? Like this is like, just that sort of like, I don't know what the word is that I want, the sort of innocent, it's determination, but it's almost like indignation. It's like an innocent version of like, I don't really care about whatever the thing is. Like, this is what I got to do.
Yeah.
And if that's what I got to do, that's what I got to do. And the reason I bring that up is because I think one of my favorite things, because this is another instance where you meet somebody for the first time in a conversation on a podcast that you've seen already do a lot of conversations because he's had a lot of media. And then you start to get a sense of someone's personality and character and the things that you really like and admire, of which mostly for him was just striking a real even balance with like the things that were hard, the things that he looks back on, how they affect him now, whether they even affect him that much now. There was just an ease about it.
Yeah.
It's not like there was no version of him telling old stories, whether they were like pretty serious things about upbringing or just lighthearted ones like that, where it looked or seemed like he was still wrestling with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And that sort of ease was really, really refreshing to me. Just, he had a lot of confidence and he had a lot of just, it seemed like peace
I was just gonna say,
with
yeah,
things.
like
So,
it's interesting that he just comes off like he just has like a lot of peace, like as a person.
yeah.
But then also like, I mean, and we don't even have time to delve into the entire part of the conversation, but like when talking about his grandpa,
Yeah.
as a grandfather, how like the word I would use to describe that kind of situation would also like be peace or a synonym of peace. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting that it's like someone can both have the trait themselves, but also like give it to others through their work and their music. I think
Well, I
it's a
think
pretty
that's
rare.
that's a really big point. Is I don't know that everybody realizes that that's what they're doing, and it's an inevitability. You know, that you sort of like impose, especially the more tight you are with people, you impose these characteristics of yourself on others.
Yeah,
And yeah, like, yeah, I just think that's like, he even just passed that off just by listening. Yeah.
which
Just
I
by
love.
being a part of the conversation. So
Yeah,
I really like that. Yeah. And there's a lot, him and I didn't even dive into all the stuff about his
it could have
grandfather.
been like a 3-hour episode.
Well, I mean, it was partially because I wanted to respect that that was his first record, which is like 4 years ago. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to just dwell on the themes, even though it's a very successful record. It was a big breakout for him. Like, very few people get a breakout on a first record
right.
of like any level of star to superstar to just average musician. Most people don't get a
First,
giant
yeah,
breakout
yeah.
first record like that. So that is pretty amazing. And he just, yeah, that peace, but that humility with it. Just a sense that he's learned more than he's letting on.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, there's probably a depth of knowledge that's deeper than what he's letting on. And also just a willingness to kind of both go along for the ride while working hard at his craft. So just a nice balance of a person
Yeah.
to run into.
Well, even like there was one moment there he was talking about like being anxious, like performing and
Yeah.
like, you know, like, I mean, there's two sides to that conversation. Like the first one that relates to this is like he can just like he was describing his anxiety, but again, he was like talking about how he was like using it, like, you know, like using it as like a driving factor and like, you know, using it as like a positive thing, which is such like a like therapist thing to
Yeah, that's a good
go and
point.
say. Like I've definitely heard that in like those kind of settings of like the like, you know, there's good anxiety and there's bad anxiety, and like a lot of the time it is how you frame it, like it's a mindset thing. And so like even hearing that he sees like stage anxiety and his own anxieties as good anxiety for himself, like I think also kind of was that point for me that I heard that I was like, it really like sealed the deal on like, I'm like, oh, he's, yeah, like peace is the right word, like he's really
Yeah.
in tune.
Yeah. There was a lot that could have just slid into talking a lot more about
Definitely.
with him for sure. But I'm looking forward to, I mean, I really kind of hope he wins some more Juno awards. I think that would be really great. That's coming up really soon. And I think he definitely deserves it. There's just not even, I was thinking afterwards about his music. I mean, it gets played a lot on like our Sonic here in Edmonton, which is,
Right.
you know, the quote unquote alt rock station. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a guitar driven, it's just sort of, he still has that Canadian-ish
Yeah.
version of that in there. But a mix of a lot more things, obviously. But it's, yeah, he sort of has a bit of a lane to himself. I feel the way he's
Like he's got his own
writing
thing
music.
going.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. And maybe I bring that up only because maybe I didn't give that enough thought even before talking to him.
That's fair.
But yeah.
That's fair. Question for you.
Yeah, question for me.
Like I knew you were excited about this interview. I mean, you're excited for all of them. Let's be honest. But
Thanks for saving the political.
yeah, you're so welcome.
Thanks.
No, but I knew you were like we were just talking about this one before, like right before it happened. Just because usually I don't see you like immediately before you podcast. So we were just chatting. But like, was there like I talked to you prior,
Yeah.
and you always have kind of like your lanes that you imagine the conversation kind of going down, but you also leave a lot of room for the conversation to take itself where it needs to go.
Yeah.
But I was like wondering, like, is there anything that came up in conversation, not that like surprised you the most, but like, was there any part of the conversation that like you didn't expect to come out of like the podcast interview? Like, was there anything that like, I guess surprised you is the right way to say it, like about him or like the interview itself? Or
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think I told you afterwards, I think one of the things that just surprised me was, and this isn't totally related specifically to how you're asking the question, but
that's okay.
in my efforts, we talked about it right before, in my efforts to do a little better at preparing and steering a conversation, especially when I know some artists are very specific about they have this much time to talk, not to leave it super open. And so I had prepared specifically for that and for him. And then the very first thing he almost said before we even hit record was that, you know, some people, you know, in these give him like a handful of, like they give him the questions in advance so he can prepare.
Right.
And he doesn't like that. He just kind of, then he tells them that I just kind of want to start and see where the conversation goes.
I like that.
I like that because that's generally how I've always approached it. And then it's funny that his was the interview that I'm like, okay,
let me tighten things up.
I'm going to tighten things up this way and this way and this way. And then right off the bat, it was just like,
he's like, let's let it loose.
Yeah, it was just, and I don't know if it was serendipitous or what the thing was, but it's like, you know, it's like I needed an outside force. And it's like my guest was reminding me about sort of the thing that I feel comfortable with. Okay.
And I have a follow-up question to
a follow-up.
Let's not forget this is posted with Alexi. You might need your phone for this one though.
Oh, what?
On the Spotify app that you just learned how to use properly. But this is my question. I wrote it beforehand. That's how prepared I am for my own episode. If someone hasn't heard him yet, what song should they listen to first and why?
Oh, it's got to be his breakout hit, Nomads. Because two reasons. One is like, there's a reason why it blew him up so fast. So I think it's always important. Also, I think it really captures the thing that is, to me, the most trademark about him, which is him and I talked about in the episode, is his voice.
Right.
Like, I think there's just a certain thing about his voice that it's like I can be not paying attention at all, driving, and maybe Sonic's on the radio. And that song will come on and maybe the verse doesn't shake me out of whatever I'm thinking or doing. But as soon as the chorus comes, I know exactly who I'm listening to.
I love that.
And the shaping of words and sound, especially, just he's got a way that he's learned how to do it that I think is really trademark for him. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, we've already talked for 18 minutes. I'll save this for the next time.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna pull out some. I was thinking, I don't know. I've threatened to do social media segments on a few things that we talk about, and then I never get around to it. But I was thinking about another one because on the plane recently, I was listening to some like old indie hits that to me were like really great, or like really great albums that I remember. I listened to this a lot. And there were ones that I never saw gain traction with a lot of people. Like I was usually introducing them to other people. I thought maybe I should dig some of these things out and just shed some light on some. But
I like that.
Maybe not. But we'll save it for another time. Maybe next episode.
Maybe I'll put you on as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation every time. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, that was Posting with Alexi.
That was
Thanks for joining me, Glenn.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Okay, see you next week.
Bye.